Welcome back to Inside the GMAT. I'm your host, Zach. There is one topic in the MBA admissions landscape that is totally reshaping how things are done, and that, of course, is AI, artificial intelligence, with ChatGPT and other generative AI platforms really playing more of a role in that application process. A lot of business school candidates are left wondering how much AI is too much AI, and will usage of AI help or hurt my chances? To help unpack this complex and evolving topic, I'm joined today by Loubna Bouamane, founder of Admissions Concierge and trusted expert in MBA admission strategy. Loubna, welcome to the show.
Hi, Zachary. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into AI, could you introduce yourself and share a bit about your background and experience with working with MBA applicants?
Sure. So I come from both sides of the MBA table. Actually, I spent several years as the director of MBA admission at the US Business School. So I've been inside the process, reading thousands of applications, running committees, interviewing candidates, all of it really. That experience gave me a really strong sense of what schools are actually looking for beyond just numbers or buzzwords. Before that, I earned a PhD and I worked in academia and career advising. And now for the last several years, I've been running my own boutique admission consulting firm. I work with domestic, but also international applicants that are aiming for top program in North America, but also in Europe. I work with a lot of non-traditional applicants. I would say that's my specialty. People with great stories who don't always know how to translate their experiences into a compelling MBA narrative. And I would say that what sets my approach apart is that it's very personalized. I spend a lot of time with my clients helping them get clear on who they are and where they're going. Because once that part is figured out, the writing becomes much more powerful, especially now in the age of AI. I think that kind of authenticity has become even more important. So my work is part strategy, part storytelling, and a lot of real talk. That's how I help people stand out.
Real talk. I love that. I think we would have worked together had we met when I was applying to business school. I definitely think that. So what was your reaction when you first saw AI enter the field and over the years, how it's been adopted, not just to every aspect of people's everyday life, but specifically the business school admissions process?
You know, when AI started showing up in the MBA world, I wasn't necessarily alarmed. I was curious. I thought, okay, this could actually be useful in small ways. You know, if someone's stuck staring at a blank page, maybe it helps get the structure going. For international applicants or people coming from non-traditional backgrounds, it can take some of the pressure off, at least in the early brainstorming phase. And I've worked with clients who've used it in that way to organize their thoughts, to explore how to talk about certain topics or experiences. In those cases, AI was a tool, not a crutch. And that's totally fine. But very quickly, I started seeing the other side. I'd review essays that were very smooth, very articulate, grammatically perfect, but they were completely hollow. There was no depth, no voice. Sometimes I'd finish reading and think, okay, this could have been written by anyone, really. And that's the problem, especially in a process where standing out is everything. So that's when I realized AI can make things faster, but it cannot make them meaningful. It doesn't know what really shaped you or how something felt in the moment. It doesn't know what you actually want out of an MBA. That level of reflection, the kind that makes an application compelling, still has to come from you. And ironically, the more polished the AI generated essays get, the easier it is for us, consultant or admissions readers, to spot when someone is not doing the work. You cannot fake that kind of insights. Not with AI, not with a coach. That part really has to come from the applicant.
I do think that's so interesting that like the more polished it is more of an indication that maybe you're leveraging some tools in the wrong way. Would you say that it's speed at which AI can help you generate materials be the number one reason why it's become so prevalent?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the speed of with which it generates, structures or even, templates was definitely, what was appealing about about AI. And I think when used right, it's totally fine. But I think there's a fine line between going too far and letting AI take over your story. That's really where you should draw the line.
So when you're talking about your story, does that mean that the most common ways you're seeing applicants use it is in their essays, or how are you seeing MBA applicants sort of use AI as a crutch?
Okay. So one of the most common way I see applicants using AI is to draft early versions of their personal statement or main MBA essay. So you will see a lot of applicants will input the school prompt and ask AI to write a response based on their resume or bullet points from their career. Other uses that I've seen is for research, things like pulling key facts from a school's website about curriculum, leadership opportunities or recruiting statistics. It's almost replaced the school's website for some candidates, which has its pros and cons because AI is not always up to date with the latest information. So it's risky to rely on that to get, critical information like deadlines and new updates about the application process. I've also seen applicants using it for idea generation. Prompts like, what are good leadership stories for an MBA essay? Or what goals should I write about if I'm transitioning, for example, from finance to consulting? It becomes a brainstorming partner, if you will. Sometimes a useful one, but it can also box people into very generic territory. So idea generation is fine, but also, you should be careful of not falling into the generic territory. And in some cases, AI is used to fine tune the language, checking grammar or making sentences more polished. But what starts as editing can easily slip also into rewriting. And that's where the authentic voice starts to fade. And so overall, AI is being used in almost, I would say, every stage of the application. But what varies is how intentionally applicants use it and how much they're still in control of their own story.
Intentionality seems to be the name of the game when using AI, and using it for those broad strokes, idea generation, or in some cases, as you mentioned, actually asking specific questions about leadership, for example. That seems really risky. Do you think that a lot of applicants are worried about getting caught using AI? Like, there seems to be a trade-off, right, between like the speed at which I can use this program versus the risk of maybe accidentally submitting something that is similar to what somebody else submitted.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the fear of getting caught using AI comes up a lot. But honestly, that's not really what admission committee are focused on. They're not sitting there with AI detectors trying to bust people. What they're actually looking for is whether the application feels real. The question they're asking is, does this sound like a person who knows themselves? Can I hear their voice in this essay? Can I understand how they think, how they've grown, how they make decisions? That's the stuff that makes an application memorable. And it's also the stuff that AI just doesn't do well. AI writes clean sentences, sure, but it tends to flatten everything out. The emotions feel generic. The reflection is usually shallow. So even if it's not obvious that a chatbot wrote it for you, admission readers can tell when something lacks depth and honesty. So I believe the real risk isn't really getting caught. The risk is sounding like everybody else, like someone who didn't do the work of reflecting. That's what makes an essay fall flat, whether AI helped write it or not.
That's such a good point. And I think it's worth remembering that the people who read these essays and personal statements have read thousands of them. So they know what makes one strong and what makes one weak. And if all of a sudden they all start sounding samey in like 2023 onwards, they're going to notice probably really quickly if one has been artificially generated.
Absolutely.
But you mentioned schools and what they're looking for. And I'm curious if you know how some business schools are responding to AI use in applications. Are they condoning it? Are they adding any guidelines to their website? What's going on in that space?
So we're definitely seeing top MBA programs start to update their policies to keep up with how widespread AI use has become. Some are obviously moving faster than others, but The trend is clear. Schools are trying to draw a line between using AI as a tool and crossing into the territory where the work is no longer reflects the applicant. Take Harvard, for example. They've said that using AI for brainstorming or helping clarify your ideas might be okay, but the final content needs to reflect your thinking, your voice. In other words, the tool can support you, but it shouldn't speak for you. And then you have Colombia, for example, that has taken, I'd say, firmer stance. They've made it very clear that submitting AI written content violates their honor code. So they're treating it the same way they would treat plagiarism, and they're not shy about rescinding offers of admissions if they found out. At the same time, these schools aren't necessarily anti-AI. They do understand that the technology is here to stay. And they've even started integrating AI topics into their MBA curriculum, offering courses on how to use these tools responsibly in a business setting, for example. The message from school isn't don't touch AI, it's use it wisely, use it ethically, and be honest about what's truly yours. And that's a message that applicants need to hear. AI isn't necessarily off limits, but using it well takes judgment, and schools are watching closely for that.
I appreciate you saying that, especially because so many students right now are interested in exploring topics in AI in business. Like they want that to be part of the curricula of the program that they attend. So for a school to be smart about it, I think really is in line with what business school candidates today are looking for. And with that, I really want to dive deeper into like the smart versus risky AI usage, because I think it's personally so interesting. I'm someone who considers themselves a writer, and I love using AI for idea generation, as you mentioned. And I think it's actually pretty darn useful in that situation. In addition to idea generation, what do you think are some smart and responsible ways that applicants can use AI tools during the application process?
Yeah, there's definitely many ways you can use AI. For example, for project management support, you can ask AI to organize application steps across all schools. You can create a study or prep schedule for your test, like GMAT. You can prompt it to track your recommendation letters request, your transcripts request. So a great project management tool. Another great way to use it is for polishing, not composing, but polishing your essay. You can ask AI to help you shorten an essay to meet the word count limit. You can use it for grammar, spelling, clarity check, or request alternate way to phrase a sentence that you already wrote. So that's where you should draw the line. The minute AI starts writing the full sentence or full paragraph for you, that's where you probably went too far.
I completely agree. And sort of on the flip side of that, what are some really risky ways to use AI?
So one of the riskiest moves is submitting an AI-generated essay without personal edits. Even if the grammar is perfect, the voice will be flat. The reflections, surface level, and the result really sound generic. Another big red flag is using AI to write recommendation letters. I mean, not only is that unethical, but it usually shows in tone and detail. And then there's the obvious risk, using AI to invent achievements or exaggerate impact. That's not just risky, that's disqualifying. So the bottom line is, if AI starts replacing your insights instead of supporting your thinking, you're crossing a line. And tools can help you think, but they cannot think for you.
I had never even considered that somebody could use ChatGPT to fake their letter of recommendation.
Letters of recommendation will start all sounding the same at some point. So you have absolutely nothing to gain going that route. It's better to have a letter of recommendation that feels authentic, even if it's awkwardly phrased, than having something that lacks any authenticity. And also remember, you will not be judged by the writing quality of your recommenders. That's not what you're being judged about. What the admission committee wants to see is, they want to read stories about you, about what you've achieved, what you've done, and how you brought impact. They don't care about the flowery language. They don't care about the structure of the sentences. Often tell my clients, if your recommender is not English speaker, it is okay if there is some awkwardness here and there. That's not what matters. What matters is really the content.
I love that. And when I think about somebody who is maybe using AI for something like a letter of recommendation, sounds like maybe that person didn't do a great job planning their overall application process. Maybe they're really butting up against a deadline, right? And that's why I like your suggestion of being able to use AI as a project management tool, because that can help you keep on schedule, can remind you like, hey, there's X amount of weeks before this deadline is up. So you mentioned authenticity. And I know that in your work, in your business, you really consider authenticity as the number one competitive advantage. Can you elaborate on why that's particularly true, not even in just today's application environment, but like the application in general?
Right. So at this point, anyone can write an essay that sounds good with the help of AI. That's not the hard part anymore. The grammar is clean and the structure is fine. Maybe it even hits some key buzzword here and there, but admission officers are reading, like I said, hundreds of those essays. And honestly, a lot of them just tend to blur together at some point. So what actually stands out is the depth. They're looking for self-awareness. They're looking for emotional honesty, a real sense of who you are and why you are making the choices that you're making. Just, I want to lead, or I value teamwork, but why? And what in your life has actually shaped, those values? When an essay feels personal, when it has details and reflection that clearly didn't come from a chatbot, it cuts through the noise. That's what makes someone memorable. And schools are very good at spotting that difference. So in a way, authenticity has become a kind of competitive edge almost. It used to be something I pushed for with my clients because, it was compelling, but now it's even more critical. Now, authenticity really is what separates real candidates from AI polished, forgettable ones. You cannot fake self-awareness, and that's what schools are really looking for.
For folks who don't know how to really dig deep and put those authentic moments and emotions on paper, do you have any strategies that you would recommend?
So first, try writing your initial draft without AI at all, just you and a blank page. You'll be surprised how much more honest and specific your thoughts are when you're not being steered by algorithm. Second, I would say reflect on what moments shaped you, not just what you did, but how it made you feel and grow. And finally, get feedback from people who actually know you, not just for grammar, but also for voice and tone. Ask them, does this sound like me? That simple check can make a world of a difference.
So what are some of the questions that an applicant can ask themselves to sort of prompt that initial draft?
Some of the questions you can ask yourself to make sure that you being authentic in your essays is to think back to all the challenges that you have encountered at work in a professional setting, but also in your extracurricular activities, especially kind of recall stories about leadership, teamwork, and think about challenging situations and how you handle them and what you've learned in the process. And then think about the values that you have developed over the course of your life and try to make the connections. What are the values that drive you day in and day out that you use in your daily life, when you are met with challenges at work? So I think it's a reflection about what are the set of values that I live by and how do I use these values to become a successful leader. So this is a good place to start.
Do you have any other exercises or approaches that you would recommend to help applicants develop, I guess, those personal leadership narratives?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that one of the best ways to uncovering meaningful stories for your MBA application is actually really simple journaling. That's what I advise my candidates to do. And I don't mean writing pages every day. I mean sitting down and reflecting on a few key moments around leadership or decision making. Like I mentioned earlier, think about times where you were challenged. Ask yourself, what was going on? What decisions did I make? What was at stake? And most importantly, again, I come back to that, is What did I learn about myself in that moment? Those are often the moments that lead to the strongest essays because they reveal your character, not just accomplishments. Another exercise I like to recommend is the value alignment check. List your top 5 values like accountability, growth, creativity, impact, whatever values you identify with, and then ask yourself, when did I actually live this out? What moments in my career or in my life reflect these values the best? That can get you clear on what matters most and what kind of leader you're becoming. And finally, don't overlook the value of conversation. Sometimes the best stories come out when you're just talking with a friend, mentor, a former manager. They'll often remember something impactful that you did that you probably completely forgot about. And they will reflect back something about your leadership style that you probably wouldn't have thought to include in your essay.
Are you able to share an example of how an applicant that you've worked with successfully preserved that unique voice, their values, etc., while still using these modern tools?
So I had a client who came from corporate finance background. And like many applicants, she was kind of struggling with where to start her why an MBA essay. So she used AI to kind of help her sketch out a rough structure just to get the pieces on the page. It gave her kind of a basic outline, just enough to get her moving. But the real shift happened when she took that framework and starting layering in her actual experiences. So she ended up writing about a crisis project that she led during COVID, a situation that really pushed her into an uncomfortable leadership territory that really forced her to manage uncertainty and taught her a lot about how she shows up under pressure. What made the essay powerful was not the structure that she created with AI. It was her voice. She rewrote the whole thing using her own tone. It was honest, it was sharp, and she wasn't afraid to talk about her failures and what she learned from them. Again, this is how you show authenticity. And you could feel when you read her essay, you could feel this sense of, okay, this is real. This is a real story. She ended up getting into 2 of her top choice schools. So she used AI as a tool, not a shortcut. The story, the insight, the voice, that was all her. And that's what made it work.
I really like this example because the thing that makes a story compelling is not the ending. It's the journey and it's how somebody in a story overcomes a conflict. And I think that really ties into this idea of like, if it's too perfect, if it's too polished, then it's too hollow. And I think that those imperfections, those conflicts, those bumps in the road really are what makes something authentic. And that just can't be fabricated. So looking ahead, how do you think that expectations in admissions will evolve?
So we are already seeing signs that schools are shifting towards more human-centered assessments. So I would expect more weight to be placed on interviews, video essays, and just real-time interactions. Anything that helps assess authenticity and communication style. So tools for detecting AI-generated content may also become more common, but the real shift will be in what schools value: self-awareness, interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence. I mean, it's always been the case for an MBA. Those qualities are absolutely critical. But now they will become even more important, and the burden is really on the candidate to show these qualities through their writing.
It's a pretty astute observation that there might be more emphasis placed on the interview aspect of the application process. What do you think that looks like?
I think interviews are going to get more real, less rehearsed, less tell me what you think I want to hear. Schools are already leaning into behavioral questions that make you talk about actual things that you've done, not just hypotheticals. And with video interviews, for example, they're really paying attention to your tone, to your presence, and whether your voice matches what you wrote in your essays. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing more spontaneous or even slightly uncomfortable prompts to see how you think on the spot. And it's really about figuring out, does this person know themselves? Are they consistent? Do they actually align with with our school's values? It's less about performance, I would say, and more about presence.
So before we go, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
For applicants that are listening to us today, I'd say this: don't rush to impress. Focus on being understood. So many applicants think that the key is sounding accomplished or using, the right words. But what actually stands out, especially to the admission committees reading hundreds of essays, is really clarity and self-awareness. So take the time to reflect before you write. Think about what you've learned, how you have grown, and why now really feels like the right time for you to pursue an MBA. That type of insight is what turns a good application into a compelling application. And remember, you don't need to have a perfect story. You just need a true one. That's what lands. That's what connects. And at the end of the day, that's what gets you in.
I love that. Imperfection is actually what's perfect, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Loubna, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have you back soon.
Thank you, Zachary.
In conclusion, if you're navigating your MBA application and wondering how to use AI the right way, just remember it's a tool and not a stand-in for you or your personal experiences. For more insights or to connect with Loubna, check out admissionconcierge.com. Thank you for listening, and be sure to follow or subscribe to Inside the GMAT on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review and share the episode with a friend maybe who's also on their business school journey. I'm Zach at GMAC, and this has been Inside the GMAT. Until next time.